all for being here. We are in budget season, and in budget season, we typically invite the public without prior notification to provide comment on budget priorities. However, we have no one from the public here, so we'll skip right over that. Brings us to the report of the secretary. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of our last regular meeting?
I move we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021.
I second. Heather?
Thank you, Heather. Any comments, questions? I had one. On page 2 of the minutes under number 4, in the second sentence that starts with Principal Rob Scully, shared a recent collaborative problem solving. I think that word is supposed to be initiative. It says imitative. That's no doubt a spell check error.
Yeah.
That should be initiative, I believe. And that was the only one I found. Anybody else? And otherwise, excellent job as usual. All right, if there are no further comments and questions, let's bring it to a vote. All in favor? That is 6-0. Thank you. And that brings us to the report of the chair. A town officials meeting was held on March 10th. Jen, you were there. If you
I was
wouldn't
there.
mind giving us some highlights.
Sure thing. Perry started off talking about the town council in South Berwick has frozen their search for town manager for the time being. Also he talked briefly about the South Berwick town budget, some details regarding equipment there. We talked about the budget workshops we're beginning, touched on home valuation and increases, the effects on taxes there in South Berwick. Perry mentioned there is currently a moratorium on storefronts in South Berwick. Again, talked about the marijuana issue. Still lots of ongoing discussion in South Berwick leading up to the vote there. And then we concluded with John talking about the budget presentation from the 3rd, and the reminder that the PowerPoint's available online, and there was just some general discussion around that budget presentation there. And that's all I have.
That pretty much agrees with my notes. John,
Okay.
anything you want to
No,
add?
that's exactly what I had.
It's the same day as our budget referendum vote.
Yep.
It's June, whatever the first Tuesday in June, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I keep wanting to say 8th, but I don't know that that's right.
I don't have the phone here now, I'm sorry, I can have my phone.
Okay. Yeah, I have it on June 8th. I have a
8th.
note that says it's June 8th.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Jen.
Yep.
Okay, and then secondly, we had our first budget workshop earlier this evening. And we heard presentations from high school, middle school, athletic, and maintenance budgets. Some really good work being done around, in general, reducing year on year some of the other costs, of course, the salaries and benefits. We talked about staff as well, balancing out staff, generally reductions based on our decline in enrollment, so all of that appears to be in line and in order. We had some good discussions about some alternatives, especially around the maintenance and facility stuff. Anybody else from the board have any comment on this first workshop?
I think you did a great job.
Yes.
Diving
Yep.
into the stuff and looking at trends to look at what the areas that they could reduce, even if it wasn't huge reductions.
Right.
We talked about
Yep. Absolutely.
And
John?
the,
I'm sorry.
at the high school, I think the change in career technical stuff was a significant.
Yes.
Yep.
Had some impact.
Yes. John, anything else you wanted to add on that topic?
No,
Okay.
absolutely.
Good. All right, that brings us then to the report of the superintendent. John?
Awesome, thank you
Good
very
one.
much. I have included in your packet an updated draft calendar, and so my plan is to share this with you this evening, and then I would bring it back to you the first meeting in April to vote on the calendar. And so I provided it to the principals that they're going to share it with their teams. I also provided to the QEA to be able to be collaborative with them when looking at the calendar. But I just want to share a couple of the highlights in the calendar that's included with this. And again, this is a draft, and so if there's any feedback that you'd like to give me this evening, please do so. A little bit of a change. Some of the sentiments from the staff that we received after this opening was that having the additional day or days before school started was really impactful. And so when Dr. Nash created the calendar years ago, there was two kind of vehicles that were used. There was the 175 school days. There was parent-teacher conferences that made up part of that. There was some professional development days, and then we had kind of this pool of collaborative planning time hours. And so we had basically each building or each staff member, slightly different for the high school, had 18 3/4 hours roughly that they would be able to have collaborative planning time where they would work under the guidance of a principal with a peer around a given issue. So it could be around curriculum development, it could be around exploring a new reading program, a new math program, and so that's something that was used. So it was a dilemma, but I felt as though with the feedback that I received, and I've had the conversation with the QEA and I'm waiting to hear back officially, but taking some of those hours away and allowing the staff to come in on a given day in addition where everybody's here. And so really the first day, if I'm a staff member, is traditionally, a large part of it is spent in here where we kind of introduce new staff, we want to welcome everybody back, the board chair shares their thoughts, and by the time that they get back to their building, it's probably lunchtime at that point, and then the elementary schools have sneak peeks in the afternoon, and pretty much the day is gone. And so there isn't a lot of time for building level work or building level initiative work. And so really, this plan would be taking some of those hours and adding an additional day to the calendar. It doesn't cost us anything more. It's just they wouldn't have the additional 7.5 hours of the collaborative planning hours, so we would take that away. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does.
Yep.
We would start school with students on Wednesday the 1st. We would have Friday prior to Labor Day off, just so everybody's aware. That would be a 4-day weekend. The Friday the 8th would be a professional development day. And just I want to remind everybody that part of this work is that we have to be within 5 days of all 7 schools in the SRTC group. And so Massabesic, Wells, York, Kittery, Noble, Stanford, Massabesic, and ourselves. So there's 8 of us, 7 other ones. So there's 8 schools. And so I used to think that if we just had 5 days on our own that were different, that would be fine. But the reality is we have to have, out of the 8 schools, we can only have 5 days that are different amongst all of us.
Wow.
And so that makes things really tight. And so the Friday prior to Indigenous Peoples Weekend is the statewide competition for the vocational students. And so that's a day that Stanford takes off. And so that's why we just tack our professional development day on there. So it's one less dissimilar day.
Yep.
So we can align our calendar. Yep. The Friday the 3rd, same thing. A number of the schools were taking that day off. So we tried to align to be able to align with the calendars.
Sure.
One, we're a little bit of an outlier, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. We met last year, and I made the proposal that due to the number of people that we expected at the presidential election, that we wanted to take the Tuesday of voting day as a professional development day. And with the numbers that we had, I thought that was a really good decision. But when we talked about it, I couched it saying it would be just on presidential election days.
Yep.
And so, of course, I'm going to come back to you and say something different a year later. We had planned to do ALICE training, and that's a district-wide training around school security, school violence, training staff. It's intense work that we would train our entire district staff. And so the only day that other schools were already taking in the calendar that would make sense for us earlier in the school year was that Tuesday, which was typically election day. So some school districts shut down for election day no matter what. And so I don't want to make this a habit. I don't think we need to make it a habit, but I do think we need to keep it in our mind as far as the presidential election goes. But this is kind of a little bit of a different circumstance. Sure. I did not feel like bringing school staff back on August 30th after a pandemic where people's nerves have been shot. It's been a tough year. I think part of this is acclimating staff to coming back to the building. There's some work that we've got to do, bringing our communities back together, as what we talked about during our group. I did not think diving into a conversation about school violence
No.
on those first 2 days was a wise decision. And
No.
so that's why I would recommend that we take that on November 2nd day and really denote that day for that. That's going to be intense, particularly for our elementary school teachers. That's a really traumatic, for all of us, very traumatic, but it's just,
Yep.
it's difficult. So, but it's work that we need to do. December, we would start the winter break on the 23rd. It's going to be a little bit shorter break just because of the way that the holidays
sure.
fall. January, we'll have Martin Luther King Day off, which is the 17th. February is pretty clean as far as, it's going to be the fourth week, which is a little bit different than what it's kind of been in the years past just because where President's Day falls. March is kind of that prime educational month where there's minimal disruptions until you take into account snow. And then April, obviously we build that around when Patriots Day falls, and that's typically how we establish our calendar. May, obviously the 30th is Memorial Day. The one thing I am not thrilled about, but I think we have to take a calculated risk, is that the 10th would be our last day of school, but that also could be graduation. Not ideal. And so statistically looking at it, we average 2 to 3 snow days a year, and so my guess would be that we would probably have at least one snow day.
Yep.
That would push that date off. I would like to avoid that, but as I looked at this, it created some more dissimilar days with the SRTC calendar. It created some other issues, and so we could have taken a random day off. Like one of the opportunities, I think, forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think York and another school, maybe Massabesic, has in their teacher contract that they have their Friday off before April break. It's kind of a negotiated day that they take off. We could have taken that day off and then pushed the graduation out to the 13th. I just felt funny to me. And so certainly, if it's something that the board has interest in, certainly that's just me looking at it and Ryan talking about it. That would be an option that we could take, but it felt a little funny to me.
Haven't we always done graduation on Friday?
Always on graduation on Friday. Yeah. The trick with graduation is it's not only the day, it's also making sure the seniors have a minimum number of days in order to meet the quality. There's that 5-day window that we've got to fall into. So it's always been on a Friday.
Yep.
And so we couldn't put it to the 3rd because we didn't have enough days, and so we have to put it on that 13th. And then that kind of gives those senior week activities that the kids would have. So.
Got it.
Any questions? I mean, I certainly, if you would like me to investigate, I believe it's the 15th of April is a day that we could take off and not affect the dissimilar days and push school out another day. We certainly could do that. I just didn't know what message that would send to the community, and I just felt like that was something that just may feel a little bit awkward, and so I just felt like we'd be better off to kind of stake our claim that maybe we're going to get a snow day.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Well,
We won't have to move the 2nd February meeting.
no,
We
No,
usually
we're
have to
good.
move a meeting in February
Yeah.
because of vacation. We won't have to do that this year.
yeah.
Are you still doing early releases and late starts?
That is the plan right now, unless the board tells me otherwise, that we would still want to have that collaborative planning time. And so one of the things that's been a little bit of a struggle is making sure that as we start to plan about next year, we recommit to what things are. And so those early release, late start days are designed around curriculum development. Like that's what they're for. They're not for faculty meetings. They're not for team meetings. They are around curriculum development work that we need to do across the district. And so just, again, making sure that everyone is on the same page with that, and as we have to start to build those habits again, because people have been out of those routines
Yep.
a little bit. But certainly if the board has a feeling to change that schedule, that obviously is a prerogative of the board to do that.
We're potentially in for another busy summer of planning,
Yep.
depending on how circumstances develop between now and then.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any other feedback around this?
Seems reasonable.
Would you like me to do some investigation around the Thursdays, or certainly give me if that's okay with that. I mean, I just want to make sure.
Around
I think
the
it's
The
Thursday.
Thursdays, are we committed to keeping those Thursdays in?
If that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but maybe we should look into maybe not doing it anymore just because of the impact on the families.
Yep, okay.
For childcare.
Okay.
But if everyone else is not in agreement with that, because would that change the calendar in terms of, adding more professional development days, correct? Or early release days to accommodate that? Like back how it was before?
Yeah, I think we could do whatever we needed to do.
Right.
And so I think traditionally kind of the plan had been that we then go to the half days. And so I think one of the struggles that we had was that, and this is my words, not anybody else's, but it had a feeling like we were giving professional development at the cost of kids' education. So they were losing 3.5 hours out of school because technically a half day counts as a full day with kind of when we count 175 days, and so that was kind of the trade-off. And so when we created the new schedule, the magic is that we were able to not only create that collaborative planning time on a weekly basis, we also increased everybody's time in the classroom. And so that way it wasn't there was no educational expense to do that. So that was the philosophy when we went into that, because remember when we were at that point, because I worked extensively on putting these numbers together years ago. We had some schools that were literally a 6-hour and 5-minute day, and we had the middle school that was like a 7-hour and 15-minute day. And so there was no consistency across the district around that. And so that's when we kind of said, here we go, we're gonna make this real simple. And the other part is that busing dictated everything. And so we kind of had to say, okay, so hold on for a second. We're gonna have a 7-hour school day dictate everything. Like that's kind of where we're gonna start that conversation. And then we're gonna build our busing around that and adjust our schedule accordingly. So that's kind of the history of where we're at, but certainly, I will investigate whatever the board would like me to do.
Yeah, I think we ought to consider in our planning that we do go back to using that Thursday time
Okay.
for curriculum planning, and we can have the discussion as we get closer as to whether we as a board think.
Would you like me to get some feedback from the principals? Maybe can I get some feedback from staff to be able to bring back and share with all of you? Would that be?
Yeah, or even
Yeah.
revisiting some of the parent feedback, because I know that, I personally don't have younger kids, so it's not impacting
Yeah.
me. But for those families that have younger children that have to arrange for childcare, it's a stressor, and it
Yeah.
also is costly.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, after being here for a year pandemic, we may want to consider as a board to relook at the schedule.
Okay.
I think on the other end of that, though, there's the older students have really gotten used to sort of this easygoing vibe in the morning and getting going. Sort of going back to you got to be here at 7 in the morning is going to be a big adjustment. And I think having that Thursday, I don't know how students feel, but having that Thursday is sort of like something you hold on to in the week.
I
that
know of
it's
some
like-
high school students who lived for that.
Right, right.
And I'm going to speculate, I'm going to throw it out there that you're probably going to get feedback from middle school and high school families that
Right.
say,
Keep
hey,
it.
we love
yeah.
that, we love that, this, we've been able to use that. Then you're going to get elementary school families to say, getting out at 2 o'clock is really putting a burden on
Yep.
us.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
that's the
Right.
toss-up. I can ask any questions you would like me to ask.
Can I ask another, didn't we offer a program for kids to stay
We did. So
after?
we offered learning labs, where we would give students an opportunity to stay after school to be able to do academic-based things. And so that was one of the ways that we tried to answer those questions.
Yep.
Now, I don't think, I know that some schools had a lot more kids staying than others, but it certainly wasn't everybody staying, and that was
Okay.
never the intent, but that was,
And
we
can I
tried to work
circle
with
back to
different
one
groups.
other thing too? You mentioned buses driving everything, and you mentioned before when we were looking at how much more we could open up, that the bus capacity.
Yep.
I think we all know that we have a ton of people who drive their kids to school no matter what.
Sue, I can't hear you, Sue.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay. I was saying that, we were relying somewhat on bus capacity to determine how much we could reopen, when we know anyone who's driven down 236 in the morning knows that most of the people at Marshwood Middle School drive their kids. And I think we've had the discussion at Central School. Elliot, the traffic problems have shown us that bus ridership maybe shouldn't be our determining
Yeah.
factor there.
I
Is
do
that a
thi-
state law thing?
Yeah, I do think, though, let me do this. I think one of the questions that we need to get some clarity on is, what are the bus recommendations going to be next year?
Okay.
Because let's say that they keep them the same as they are right now. That is going to be vastly
Yeah.
different. Because right now, and if you would like me to, again, I'm going to share with you, this is kind of my COVID report. I am approaching next year that we will be returning to school. That's, we do not have the resources right now to run two parallel systems, and so I think that was an incredible feat to do that. I think we need to get back to what we do. Obviously, if there's remediation we need to do with students, we want to build that into our programming. That being said, that's a great statement to make, but now we got to get these kids to school. And so are we going to have to do multiple? So right now we have a 2-wave system to be able to get kids. Is it now going to be a 4-wave system? And can we, if we have capacity at 24, can we have the Thursdays? If we have capacity at 35, can we have the Thursdays? So I think we're going to need to start to do a little bit of analysis of that. So give me an opportunity in the next couple of weeks to be able to look at that a little bit more, and I'll certainly bring back some feedback. I mean, I think it is a conversation I think that's important to have. But I think at the same time, we've got to balance it off that no matter what we do, however we do it, we want to make sure that we're providing that time for staff to get that curriculum work that we need to do, because part of that is that 5-year vision as to this is where we want to be. We've got to build the tracks to do that. So let me do a little bit of work on my end and be able to give you a little bit more specifics on what I can find.
Great.
I would hope to say that I could get some clarity around next year. The reality is I probably can't around busing, but I can at least start to have those conversations and kind of see where they are with the CDC right now with that.
And it could change,
Not to dwell too much on the subject, but in the past, has Heather performed, like a bus capacity analysis yearly or annually, or is this kind of something that we're just,
yes, but
exploring?
not to the same extent.
'Cause I was going to say, okay, what are the trends? What is the trend?
Because the tricky part is, and we've got to think about this, and I got to think about it a little bit more too, because if the expectation is that buses are cleaned after every run, that's different than what we're doing 2 years ago. And so
Fair
that may naturally shorten our school days anyway. And so I just
Haven't
think,
they said that that's not, the CDC has said that the deep cleaning part is not that's
I
not
think
the
the deep
spreading?
cleaning isn't, but there's the last I knew, and I need to get some clarity on this, but my understanding is that there is still the expectation that buses are cleaned in between runs. And so that's about a half-hour process by the time they kind of go down and disinfect all the seats. Now, if that changes, that obviously makes things a lot easier as far as time-wise, we can make it work a little bit more. So let me do a little bit of work on my side, and I'll have that conversation to kind of think that through.
Sounds good. And speaking of COVID,
Speaking of COVID, just a couple of odds and ends here. First, an opportunity kind of came our way for some of our young ladies who are interested in softball. We have, I believe Rich said we had 17 young ladies that signed up to play softball. And so maybe 18, which is a really tight number to try to run 2 teams. And so Berwick Academy reached out and said, in light of the pandemic, would you consider co-oping with us for just the year? They have 2 kids, and so adding those 2 kids would allow us to be able to run 2 programs. So it's not the situation where these 2 kids would be displacing 2 of our kids. It would really be giving 7 other kids an opportunity to play a little bit more. And then the other really exciting part is that the athletic director was so positive, saying, look, and you're welcome to come over and use our facilities. And so their indoor facilities is much more conducive to that type of activity than ours is. And also they have the turf, which is a really nice thing. So our kids would benefit not only being able to play, but we would also have a facility that we would be able to use. And so I just would like to investigate that, but I'd like the blessing from the board to be able to do that. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Totally.
That's great.
It's like,
We'll go through the MPA process to do it. But it just seems like a win-win for everybody,
lemonade out of lemons again. You take
And
the
again,
thing.
I can't give Rich Buswell enough credit. You've seen it. The work that he's put into, this is not easy for anybody, but just the thinking ahead and those things, I'm just really proud of the work that he's doing.
and he's doing it with one arm.
Yeah.
One arm tied to his side, not behind his back, but that's another thing, absolutely.
Yeah, he's tremendous.
The other thing that I know you've probably caught wind of this and it's been in the news. But there's a real issue that's been brewing for the last couple weeks, and we've been actively involved in it, trying to advocate for our staff. But the state of Maine initially said that they were not going to prioritize teachers to vaccinate. And we did the letter, everyone saw the letter. The next day, we were able to kind of say that they were going to prioritize teachers. And then kind of the qualifier was that they're going to qualify teachers that live in Maine.
Right.
So we all of a sudden had an issue where we have teachers that live in New Hampshire that work in our district, or educators that work in New Hampshire, that live in New Hampshire and work in our district, that weren't eligible for the shots.
On the New Hampshire end either.
Yeah, and so the other part that compounded that is New Hampshire said, wait a second, we're going to do a closed, I think, how did they say it, like a closed system, basically. And they said, we are going to vaccinate Rochester Middle School. We're going to vaccinate, or Portsmouth Public Schools, Exeter Public Schools. So they handle their educators at a building-based level, and so whether you lived in Maine or New Hampshire, it didn't really matter. They made sure that their staff was vaccinated. So there's no vehicle for the people in New Hampshire that are teachers in Maine to get vaccinated in New Hampshire. Because one thing New Hampshire's been very clear about is you're only going to get vaccinated ahead of the time if you're a teacher in New Hampshire. Like that's the ticket for the dance there. And so it's funny. I had a conversation with the Department of Education last week during our superintendent's meeting, and I said, I just want to make you aware that there's two issues that for me, I struggle with. One is that, and I think this was handled the right way, but when they did the first wave of essential employees, everybody was vaccinated no matter where they lived. And so if you were a police officer in Elliott and you lived in New Hampshire, you were vaccinated. Okay? When teachers, after we had to have the tough discussions to get them prioritized, they didn't have the same view. And so now, a number of schools in southern Maine and along the Maine-New Hampshire border have a bunch of staff members that are caught and can't get vaccinated right now. So an email went out saying, hey, look, how many staff members do you have that are impacted by this? One school, 7, 8, 12. We have 58.
Wow.
And so that's not just teachers. I want to be clear. That could be custodians, that could be people involved, could be coaches, but 58 people. So that's a huge number. Some of them might qualify under the age piece in New Hampshire, just for clarity, but it's a big number. And so I don't think that necessarily the state of Maine realized that their district's impacted as much as this. So there's some work being done on that. And so nothing's happened. There's been letters written. We've had conversations with the Maine Department of Education, and they're working with the governor. Michelle Myers has been fantastic about advocating at the state level. So there's a lot of work being done. So we have a group of staff members that are kind of caught right now. And so that kind of leads me to my next conversation, is that I met with the building principals and said, look, we need to start talking about Marshall Middle School and Marshall High School. How do we get more students back, or how do we get students back more? And so that's a tough conversation, because I don't think it's right to say, who wants to come back, and then say, oh, wait a second, too many people came back, so we can't do it. So we've got, there's a balancing act here of like, if we open up the doors, we may get too many, and then we have to push people away. And so how do we do this in a sequential fashion, in addition to the fact that I don't know if we can get the kids to and from school because of the busing.
Right.
So there's some variables that we've got to figure out. My approach right now, and I want to make sure this is a logical approach and the board understands and accepts this, and certainly I can speed things up if you'd like me to, but what I have said is, in my mind, the plan would be that we need to look after April vacation or the first week in May to try to get kids back at Marshall Middle School at a faster level. And why is that? I need to give these staff members and all of our staff members an opportunity to be vaccinated, and then have the 2-week grace period to have the vaccination take, and then be able to have the tents up outdoors and be able to get the busing issue solved. I want to be able to have the staff actively involved in that. So we are working at this right now. I just want to be very, very clear with everybody. But that's kind of my timeline, whether it's the week after April vacation, whether it's the first week in May, I'm just ballpark. But that's why there's just some pieces right now that I can't just wave a magic wand and say, everybody come back. But we are having these conversations. I want to be 100% clear. We have opened up for particular students who are coming back, 4 days a week at the high school, because maybe some special circumstances around, some services that they may need. So we have kind of done some work. I think the cohort piece, is a little bit different now because people, the cross cohorting is tough right now, particularly at the high school. Like you've got kids in different classes, you've got kids in clubs and activities, you've got kids in athletics. There's a lot of cross cohorting right now. So we're working really hard to try to come up with a solution that makes the most sense. But I just wanted to share that with you because I'm sure you're getting questions, I'm getting questions. It's not that it's not important, but I just think confusion was added also on the 6th of March when they said buildings now can be at 50% capacity. And then on this date, I think the 26th, they can be at 75% capacity. And so that sounded really good, but the reality is if you read the fine print, what it says is that you can be up to that percentage, but you still have to follow the CDC guidelines. And
Right.
so the guidelines that we're following is the 3 to 6 feet. And so we've said from Jump Street that we're going to be at 6 feet, 6 feet or slightly over. Like that's kind of where we've landed. I have not got a feeling from the board by any means, or my personal feeling that we want to compromise on that 6 feet at this point in time. Like that's something that we feel like right now that's the recommendation. Going into next year is a different conversation, but right
For sure.
now
Yeah.
we've kind of stuck with that 6 feet. So I have not asked principals at this point to reduce that to 3 feet. I struggle a little bit with that, particularly when the vaccination piece is still up in the air.
For
And
sure.
so I'm just trying to give you my thoughts as far as how we're going forward, but that's kind of in a nutshell, kind of where all these moving parts come together. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are some districts who haven't been back to the same extent that we are, and I think that's part of the issue is that you hear these news reports like schools need to be back in session. Well, folks, we've been back in session.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, let's be really clear. Like
Right.
our elementary schools have been going full bore since day one.
Right.
Or day 4.
Right.
You know, and you know, we are looking at bringing, you know, how do we have more kids engaged at the high school? Particularly the middle school is the area that I want to see, and I had a meeting with Tony about that today, about
Right.
getting those kids back actively involved more. So I wanted to share that with you, and I hope that plan makes sense. And if you feel like we want to compromise that 3 feet right now, I certainly can start investigating that. But I just wanted, you know, for you all to kind of hear where my thoughts were. And you know me, safety is where I start, and then I work back from there.
Yep.
So I just put that out to you. If you have any questions or concerns as I share that.
I think you pointed out earlier that even if we did compromise on the distance, we still have to solve the buses.
That's correct.
So the advice on bus capacity is going to be crucial.
Yeah, and so when you think about the high school, for instance, and I'm not making any commitments, I'm just talking right now. It's very different to bring back the senior class than it is to bring back the freshman class. Why do I say that? Well, because probably a percentage of those seniors drive themselves to school every day. So the strain on busing is going to be very different if you're having 18-year-olds coming back into the building, if you're having 14-year-olds coming back into the building.
Yep.
And so, like, those are the things, like, that's the level of detail that we're trying to start to think about, and we're trying to work collaboratively with our teachers. I mean, I know that both the middle school and high school principals have started these conversations. As you can imagine, there's some teachers are very excited about that. They want to see the kids more. There's other teachers that are nervous because they worry about safety and cohorting, and so, like, there's a mixed bag, and so we've got to keep kids at the center of what we're doing, but we've got to do it in the safest way possible. And so,
Can we do like we did, with the plan for, when parents had to commit to a certain plan? I mean, we have so many people that drive their kids to school. Can we say, can you commit to that for the rest of this year? And if they're probably doing it already anyway, does that take the load off the busing situation at all?
it does, but the tricky part with that is it's just like the parents who say that I'm going to commit that I'm going to go remote for the entire year. I'm going to be in hybrid for the entire year. I can't tell you the number of people that at the high school who said they were going to be hybrid for the entire year, and then they decided to go remote. And so it's hard because we don't have a lot of teeth other than the person kind of making that commitment to us, but we also can't say, because of state law, if it's over a mile, we have to transport people. So it's a little bit tricky, but absolutely, so that's what, like, those are the types of questions that we need to start surveying parents about and getting some feedback from parents around that. But at the same time, I want to be really careful that I don't want parents to think there's an expectation that tomorrow we can have 800 students walk back into Marshall High School, because that's just not a reality. And I know you all know that, and I know they know that, but that's when they heard that 50% capacity, they're thinking, woohoo,
Right.
So just,
Yep.
Does that thought process
It
make
is.
sense to you?
It does.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to share about COVID was that we are beginning to get a lot of requests to use our facilities again. And so how am I managing that? Right now, I am really concerned about bringing outside groups into our facilities right now. That really makes me very nervous. I also, if we were to do that, we would have to charge them for a custodian, because we would have to make sure the building was thoroughly cleaned, and we may also have to charge them for an additional person to supervise to make sure that the guidelines are being followed. And so I think that there's a lot when you open up that onion. That being said, May 1st is kind of when, and the restrictions on the outdoor piece become very, very broad. And so what I've told Rich right now is that with the outdoor field use, not indoor, the outdoor field use, May 1st is kind of that magic date where we're going to say, we'll begin to talk to groups about using our outdoor facilities, not the indoor facilities, but the outdoor facilities. And I just think that that indoor facility right now, that's a bigger step. No, obviously, we're going to work with the town of Elliott to use the middle school to vote. That's a different conversation. I'm talking about youth basketball or something like that, where we're going to be very cautious as we kind of go forward. But we are getting questions to say, look, they want to do a spring football league. Would we allow them to use the facilities during the spring? And so there's a lot of different stuff that's kind of coming our way now. And so part of it is, do we want to let them use the fields? And then the other part of it is, how does this work from a Department of Human Services safety perspective? And so we're just trying to, and I think seeing the King of the Mat wrestling tournament that went down 2 weeks ago, how quickly if people, are together in those settings, an outbreak can still occur, and that we've got to be very mindful of that as we kind of go forward. We just want to avoid that at all costs. So, does that make sense to people?
It does.
Yep.
Okay. And that is all I had as far as a COVID update. Student report?
Yeah, okay. So the spring musical this year is more of a showcase of scenes and songs and monologues rather than a traditional musical. And it's hopefully going to be shown at the end of April virtually. And the one-act play is called Waiting for the Host, and it's about a church group putting on a play for Palm Sunday, but it's over Zoom. And this is going to be premiering next week, and I believe it's Saturday. AP exams this year are completely optional, so it's just up to the student whether they want to take them or not. And Interact Club will be holding monthly beach cleanups at a variety of local beaches starting this month. And Trevor?
Okay, so we're starting to see winter sports are starting to end. This Friday, we saw boys basketball play in the finals against Kennebunk and lose in OT. And we also saw girls lose to Kennebunk as well at Kennebunk in a consolation game after losing the Wells. We also saw the ski team race, and boys come in second while girls came in third. I think it was the SNHU, is that the regionals? SMAAs. And then today was the first day for class registration for next year. We had a little bit of problems with the whole registration, but it was filled out by the end of the day, and it turned out pretty well. And that's it.
The last thing I just want to leave the board with is that there's a packet or a flyer in your packet, which is the National School Board Association. They do a spring conference, and it's done virtually. If you have any interest in attending this, we haven't had anybody attend in the past, but I did want to share it with you if there was any interest. Certainly you can go online and see some of the sessions that they have available, but I did want to make that available. And if they are interested in doing it, please let me know and we can sign you up for it.
We did actually go when it was in Boston
was in
a few
Boston.
years ago, and that's how we get hooked up with Chartwell.
That was Charles.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was like Sue and Carrie's like crowning achievement, right? You guys
Yes.
came back all excited. That was exciting. Yeah, exactly right.
I know, it's where I went to all the
Who was the was it Robert was the salesman?
I don't remember.
He was
yeah.
smooth. There's no question smooth. He was a good salesman. So
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, I remember that well.
And they plied everybody with samples that were,
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. That brings us correspondence. I will mention to my fellow board members, I did get a piece of correspondence addressed to the school board. I've passed it along, having read it myself, to Jen. She'll pass it around to the rest of you. It's an organization in Wisconsin that believes that aircraft contrails are actually chemtrails and that it's a secret government plot to control the environment. So have at it. Read it at your leisure. That brings us to the report of the committees. The Finance and Facilities Committee did meet earlier this evening. I'll do my best to run the numbers quickly, and then Nat, did you want to give us a facility and transportation, and
Sure will.
actually whoever else wants to chip in. It was a bit hurried because we just spent the previous hour and a half on budget stuff, but in general, both revenues and expenditures are running lower than budget. Revenues a little bit behind expenditures, in part because the subsidy payment that for February was not posted until March 1st, so it wasn't included in the numbers for this report. So it makes our cash balance and our revenue versus expenditure picture look a little bit worse than it actually is. Federal grants, we got no February revenues on Title I and Title II. Local grant money is coming in. Adult education, we got a Kittery quarterly payment, which makes the revenue picture look good there, but we're still expecting to spend that down to zero over the course of the balance of the year. School nutrition, we received December but not January, is the note I have here, and it looks like the overall loss picture was flat January to February. CRF money continues to be a source of concern. The October payment has been submitted, and we're hoping to get that money in shortly. There's something like $600,000 or $700,000 of reimbursement coming in there when we do get that. But in general, the CRF reimbursements, we're still awaiting final reimbursements on the CRF 1, and we have monies out from CRF 2 and a 2.5, I guess I'll call it. So there's the sort of lingering fear that we may have to extend the loan that we took out. Stay tuned on that. We are at 37.1% of our budget remaining at a time when we would be at 33 1/3, so that's a little bit better than it ought to be, which is good. Cash flow, a little bit low, but we're expecting to get that back up. I think those are the highlights. Did anybody else remember anything from the numbers that I missed? And if not, why don't we move on to the facilities and transportation stuff and food service?
As far as facilities go, we locked in with Pegagnon for propane at $1.37 per gallon. Currently submitting bids for paving, roofing, and minor roof repairs due to winter weather impacts for the facilities. We have a lot of PPs on hand. We're looking to find some storage for those. And we're also looking at the 3 to 6 foot spacing in all classes, desk spacing, and looking at the logistics for that. Let's see, Ryan brought up the internet is running a little slowly. We're looking at options, inquiring about upgrading, and obtaining quotes from MSLN, which includes connectivity points, and costs may be upwards around $4,300 for pole installation with a potential add-on for a small generator to have connectivity during power outages. Let's see, transportation. We need to find drivers. One driver resigned. We need certified drivers. Heather will provide a most updated bus count within the next day or so to analyze the capacity of on our buses. And food service. Heidi and John met with Chartwells for staffing projections. Currently, we're also offering a free level service through summer. And Steve's going to analyze the economic impacts relative to transportation costs associated with that. We're also looking at the pickup versus delivery analysis and what will that program look like. I think that's roughly about it.
Great job.
That's cool. I think you've covered it all.
Check plus.
Hey, excellent. Okay, the Education Policy Committee will next meet on the 24th of March, so we'll expect a readout on that at our next meeting.
And don't get accustomed to the one new business item.
Yeah.
I'm sure after the
Right.
next policy meeting, there'll be a litany of things to talk about, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that does bring us to new business, and the one item, if I may have a motion, please, to approve the second reading of IK.
I move we approve a second reading and discussion of policy evaluation of student achievement, IK.
Second, Lisa.
Lisa, thank you. Okay, we did discuss this at our last meeting. Any questions or comments?
I think the big idea is that it's really talking about being proactive and communicating with families when children are struggling on an ongoing basis and not leaving that up to chance or up to, you know,
Now, I did notice one thing, and it's a nit. It's a really tiny nit, but in that last paragraph that's highlighted in yellow, in the event a student is having academic struggles, the student's school should be apostrophe S on students, should it not?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry,
No,
Mr.
that's good.
Language person has to weigh in, okay.
Share with Therese, yep.
Yeah, but to your point, that whole paragraph is really the heart of the
Yep.
Yeah,
thrust of this policy,
exactly.
is to make sure that there's clear communication going on.
We did some work around that because when we initially reviewed it, it really kind of said like a timestamp, like by this date we would do that. And I think we just really felt like that was not, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted it to be ongoing, we wanted it to be timely, and that we have some other policies around this, so that was why we made that change.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so with that one punctuation correction, all in favor? That is 6-0, excellent. Thank you. Any other last comments from anyone on the board or anyone present? There's no one present, so. Go ahead, Lisa.
I stayed after last meeting and had a quick chat with you and Mr. Cavali about the possibility of maybe on a monthly basis, like once a month after whenever the meetings happen, that we get an update from the SEL committee and also the wellness committee,
Yes.
both of which are mandated committees that we're supposed to have by the state. So I think you guys were like, oh, that actually makes sense because we're probably supposed to be doing that anyway. So that would just be a suggestion. if
That will happen in the
makes
next meeting.
sense to everyone else.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep,
That'd be great.
100%.
Awesome.
So our next agenda will have that.
Yeah, and this one should have had that, Lisa, and I apologize.
Oh, no.
but it will.
This would, believe me, this
Yep,
was.
I'm
we
gonna
have
text
plenty
Elaine before I
today.
leave here today to make sure we add it in going forward.
Well, and it
So-
might make sense to break them up.
Yep.
Just, you know,
Yep.
Yeah, good idea.
yeah.
Or you can put them both
That's a lot
down and
of
just,
updates.
we can talk about one, like, just to make sure we, like,
Yeah.
I just think it also is a statement that this is important.
Yeah.
You know, that just, it says that
exactly.
it's something we're
For
taking
sure.
time to talk about, so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I
Yep.
know the wellness committee was really excited about that idea, to
Yep.
be able
Excellent.
to share what's happening.
Yep.
In that.
Those committees are technically under the auspices of the board. It'd be good to hear how they're doing.
That'd be great.
100%. My apologies.
Oh,
And I know you're not
that's
saying that, but I
I
still, I
was
feel
not.
badly because I want to get it done, so.
I was not at all. I didn't know if we needed to sort of agree on that or however that was.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
I'll second, Jen.
And Jen, all in favor? 6-0, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.